you could just unmute yourself and say, hey, I have a question really quick, because that's fine too. I just want this to be kind of fluid, as if we were in my office just hanging out and you were, I was just sharing my story with you, and I want to make sure to answer any questions that you may have. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Tisha Townsend. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm a scholar advisor with TRIO Student Support Services. So I see some of my students in here. Make sure that you take a screenshot, send it to me for proof of participation. Just a friendly reminder. So I'll just start where I'm going to start. I graduated from MSU Denver with my bachelor's in Spanish in 2017. My last year of college, I was working as a student employee with TRIO Student Support Services. And so at the end of my bachelor's degree, I had actually initially been studying to be an elementary teacher, but like the last year, I changed my mind because I was like, I don't want to teach. I had learned some things and I was like, I don't think I want to be part of this problem that is our education system. But I knew I liked education and I wanted to, like, I didn't have any skills because I was like waiting tables and I was like, oh shoot, I'm going to be graduating soon. I need to get some skills. So I got a job on campus and I was like, it just like happened. I was like, oh my gosh, the stuff that they do here is so cool. Like I was watching the advisors meet with students and, seeing the stuff that they got to do. And I was like really excited about it. And it just, so happened that slowly or right before my graduation, a position opened up and I was able to apply for it and eventually get it after I graduated. It was a long process, not part of this story. But anyways, so I got my job, my professional job. It doesn't always work out that way right after college, but it happened to work well for me. Anyways, so I think my last semester of college, I knew that I was kind of wanting to work in education, and my boss then, who is still my boss now, Dr. Ali Garcia, was, trying to like guide me and say, no, have you thought about grad school? And I had already thought about grad school. I just I didn't know anything about the process. I didn't even know who to talk to about those kinds of things. Like I was that student that just kind of figured stuff out on my own as I went and made lots of mistakes. And that's just kind of how I went through my education. She helped guide me, telling me, hey, well, this is what you should do. This is when you should do it. And so that was super helpful. In my mind, before I knew that I even had an opportunity to get the current job that I now have, I was like, you know what, I want to take a year off. I wanted to take a break. I was just, because I worked full time. And actually my last year, I worked 50 to 60 hours a week just between two jobs. And I was taking 3 classes. So my last year I was like done. I was tired. I just wanted a break from school. And so in my mind, I had it that I was going to take a year off and just figure it out, because I had looked at, my idea was to continue my education in Spanish, but I was like, I don't even know what I want to do with it. And is it relevant? I knew I was passionate about the topic, but I just needed to I felt like I needed time to figure it out. But what had happened was, with this opportunity that eventually presented itself for me to get my current job, my boss was like, you should apply to grad school. It'll be really helpful. These are some programs that if you want to work in a higher education, that will be helpful for you. And so it kind of, I don't know, I think at the time, one of the things that I remember feeling was kind of pressured, because I was like, I knew I really wanted this job. Like I saw the opportunity that was being presented to me and I didn't want to mess it up. And so I looked at some different programs, not the one that I had originally looked at, because UC Denver has a master's in Spanish, and that had been the one that I was looking at because that was the only Spanish program in this area that I was interested in. I don't even remember if there were other ones that I even looked at in this area. There may not have been, not for master's degrees. Anyways, I remember feeling pressured because like I said, I didn't want to ruin this opportunity to get this job. And I was like, I will do anything I can, because I felt so passionately and so strongly that this is what I wanted to do, that I wanted to make sure that I did everything I needed to do to make that happen for myself, that I had in my own control, because it wasn't necessarily a guarantee. So I wanted to make sure I made the right choices. So I looked at a program at UC Denver, a different psychosocial justice program. Did not have a good experience there asking questions. I went to talk to some faculty members and an advisor, and like they just could not answer my questions. And I was just like very confused, asking very basic questions, and they weren't able to answer it. And it didn't feel good. And then the other program that I had looked at was DU has a higher education program. And so I went over there, and of course, DU, they really sell it and make it look like really shiny and fancy, because it is. And I was like, wow, like I wasn't even expecting to want to come here or to feel like this might be an option for me. But it was. And so my last semester of graduation, I started taking all the steps that I needed to take to apply for the program. Mistakes were made along the way. And so that's kind of my message to you when I talk about, my own graduate school experience, and when I'm giving advice to other students. I think I anyways, before I get to where I'm about to go, I eventually ended up getting accepted to DU. It was kind of interesting. And one of the things that I want to share with you that I hadn't expected to have to do. So when you apply for grad school, everything is online. They have the online checklist of all the documents that you have to submit. I went through everything. I double checked everything because I was trying to do it well before the deadline, because I'm not like one of those last minute kind of people, because I was like, this is a big deal. I don't want to mess anything up. And so I did submit all of my documents. I had green arrows all the way down for everything. And it was before the deadline. So I was like, cool, I'm done. Like, we'll just wait and see. I only applied to one program. I put all my eggs in one basket, which is another thing people, there's different ways to look at it. I didn't see any other programs that I was interested in. So I was like, I'll just see what happens. I honestly wasn't super expecting to get accepted for some reason. I was like, I don't know, but I did get accepted. The only way I found out that I got accepted is because it was like, I think a Wednesday, and I'm at work in the TRIO office, still student worker. And my boss is like, hey, did you get a call for an interview for DU? And I was like, no, I haven't heard anything. And she's like, you need to check. And I was like, okay. So I checked my emails, and I was like, yeah, I haven't heard anything either way from anybody. She's like, they're doing interviews on Friday. And I was like, what the heck? And I was like, well, I submitted my application. So I was like, maybe I didn't get accepted. And she's like, that can't be right. She had connections at DU, made a phone call. Turns out, because I hadn't yet graduated, somebody had gone in, and even though I had submitted my transcripts, they had been reclassified, but didn't get corrected as if I had actually submit them. So it looked like I didn't actually submit my transcripts, even though I did. Not only that, my transcripts ended up getting lost because I had to go through this whole process. Anyways, long story short, only because my boss had connections at DU did I even get called for an interview, only because the dean of the department, of that particular department, looked over her application, my application herself, and she just like, yeah, there was a mistake. You've been accepted. Come Friday for your interview. And it was a lot. So I kind of feel in a way that maybe I shouldn't have gotten accepted, because, there was a mistake made on their end, not on my end. So the moral of that story is double check your application. Even after you've double checked it, keep double checking to make sure that nothing gets changed, because if you haven't graduated, they might have to go in and make adjustments and may not do it correctly. That's my first graduate program story. Anyways, when I was, let's see, where do I want to go now? So I started that program, right away. I didn't take that break that I had it in my mind that I wanted and needed to take. And I just started the program right away, and it was hard. The first quarter, because they work on quarter systems, so it's 10-week classes. I took 2 classes at a time, and that was, for me, that was too much. It was a lot. And then working full-time, actually working more than full-time, because I was new and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was pulling a lot of extra hours just trying to figure everything out. I was probably working probably easily 50 hours a week. It was a lot. And so another thing nobody prepared me for, and this is one of the things that, I'm just going to be real about it, is that those first 2 quarters were really hard for me. I just remember everything was work. It was all work. All I was doing was working. I was trying to do discussion boards for class on my lunches. If I had students cancel, I was like printing out articles and trying to like get myself organized, because I knew I had to rush home and do all this reading for class the next day, because I had to be prepared to discuss, because you can't just show up to grad school unprepared for discussion. Not advised. So in addition to that, the topic, my course material was higher education. So I felt like I was always at work. I was at work during the day. I was at work in the evenings at home doing my homework. On the weekends, writing papers. I was about work stuff. And for me, while I am very passionate about the work that I get to do and that I thoroughly enjoy, that was too much work for me. And not only was I not really enjoying the course material, it was helpful in a lot of ways. And it's stuff that I do need to know. And I'm learning in other ways, learning kind of on my feet. It was just a lot. And, being so busy all the time and not really having any variety in my life, I guess is one way to put it. Like my mental health was really suffering. I was tired all the time. I was working all the time. I was stressed out. I was adjusting to a new job that I didn't know how to do anything and had very little guidance, just to be perfectly honest. And I was having a really hard time. I was miserable. And I was questioning myself from the very beginning. I was like, I don't know if this is the right place for me. DU is a very different educational experience than what I had at MSU Denver. I'm not to trash DU because I have a lot of really great programs. And I think a lot of people have really great experiences. For me, I'm a first generation student. Like I said, I didn't grow up with a lot of guidance with school. My parents just figured I would go to college and they figured I would figure everything out, which I kind of did. But I didn't come from a family that gave me a lot of guidance on that in that regard. So there was like a lot of educational elitism is what I call it. And so, as a first generation student, you find yourself in spaces where you're like, I don't even know if I belong here. Because first off, nobody looks like me. Nobody has had my lived experience, because my education is not being paid for by my family. I'm struggling to pay my own bills. That's the reality, was the reality of my life at the time. I supported my own self throughout my entire education. Like I didn't have the same experiences that I was seeing around me. And so in addition to rushing into grad school, making choices that I didn't think hadn't even occurred to me, and all the other adjustments I was trying to make, I was feeling, like I just didn't belong there. I was like, this doesn't feel good. I don't feel like I wasn't feeling respected by my peers. I wasn't feeling like I had the same worldview as them, or that they even could even begin to understand where I was coming from. And I was working with students who essentially I was my own student. Like I was fresh out of college and I'm like I am my students, at that time, that's how I felt. And so it was really interesting and isolating. And I gave it, I think five quarters is what I put into that, doubting myself the entire time, thinking that, I don't think this is a good fit. But like I said, I had this pressure that, was in my own mind really more than anything else, because I was like, I got this opportunity. I eventually got my job that I have now. I was given that opportunity and I didn't want to ruin it. But I couldn't take it anymore. Like I've always been the type of person to like follow my own path. And it's always been a detour, rocky road path, but that's just how my life has been. And I guess it seems to have worked for me. And I was like, finally at the end, I was like, why am I trying to do it any different? Like I was guided, I guess I could say, here's the path that you could take. This is going to be the right path for you. This, do this and you'll do that. And I'm like, why am I trying to do that now? I've never done that my entire life. I've always just kind of been like, here's my passion. I'm going to go that way till it doesn't work anymore. And then I'll figure it out there. And I'm like, why am I trying to do anything different? Like I've never done anything the right way. Why start now? Like it was just a realization I had to myself. And so I quit. I quit that grad program. And I was nervous. I remember being really nervous to tell my boss, because I was like, she's going to be disappointed in me. She's going to think that I'm, I had all these things I thought she was going to think. And at the end of the day, whether she thought that or not, doesn't matter. She ended up being very supportive. At least, to me, she seemed to be supportive. But even if she hadn't have been, it shouldn't matter, right? Because I didn't feel right. It never felt right for me to be in that program. Once I was in it, it didn't feel right. And I was questioning myself. And that's something that you should always trust. If something's not, it's one thing for you to be challenged and for things to feel hard and that you're having to learn a lot, but it's a very different feeling for it to be that and for it to not feel right. Those are two very distinct things, I feel. If you know yourself well enough, you should be able to tell the difference between those two. And so I knew myself well enough, I've made enough mistakes to be able to tell the difference. And so that's why I quit. And I had always had it in the back of my mind, Spanish, my language has always been something that's been very important to me. More than a professional thing, it's been a very personal thing for me to have that connection to my family, because I wasn't taught Spanish growing up. I grew up hearing it in my family, but it wasn't, I was never encouraged to speak it, so I never learned it, which is why it was important for me to learn it in college. And then I ended up making it my major because I didn't want to be a teacher anymore. And I was like, what the heck, I'll just study this, right? So I still had it in my mind that that was a passion of mine, and that was something that still mattered to me. I didn't know what I want to do with it in a professional capacity, but I knew it was a passion of mine. So why not pursue that, right? And so I wanted to think about applying to a second grad program because I knew what it meant. I knew the time and effort that it meant. So what I ended up doing is taking some refresher Spanish courses as an undergraduate at MSU Denver, like undergraduate courses, just to kind of refresh myself on my Spanish, because I'd been out for about a year, and if you don't use it, you lose it. And I wasn't using it, so I knew I was losing it. And then I applied for my second grad program at UC Denver, Master's in Spanish. My second experience applying, and this is another tip for y'all, something that you wouldn't expect to happen, much less a second time. When I submitted my application, again, green checks all down the line, got everything submitted. I knew I learned from my, the first time I was like, you got to make sure that everything is submitted. I was keeping my eye on deadlines. I knew I wasn't hearing back. And I was like, you know what, let me just check. My application got sent to an entirely different department. So the department that I was applying for didn't even have my application for review. Luckily, I learned the first time. And at that point, to be perfectly honest with you, I was like, this is the second time I apply for grad school and my application gets messed up. Am I not I literally was like, maybe I'm not supposed to go to grad school. Maybe this isn't something that I'm supposed to do with my life right now. I was scared, but I was like, well, let me just see what happens. I seriously was not expecting this time to get accepted. We were able to track down my application. The man who is now my many times over professor and my advisor looked at my application, and I got accepted into the program. So that first semester was real scary. Again, that imposter syndrome kicked in. I remember one day I had turned in one of my first assignments. It was a writing assignment. So everything's in Spanish, classes in Spanish, we speak in Spanish, we write in Spanish, we read in Spanish. And I was like, man, I was so rusty in my Spanish. And I was like, oh God, this paper is awful. And I think I got a 94 on it. And I was like, oh no, there's been some kind of mistake here. And so I stayed after class and I asked my professor, I was like, hey, did you actually grade my paper? And he's like, yeah, what do you have questions on? And I was like, well, I wasn't expecting to get this good a grade. And I just wanted to make sure that, my writing is, I'm writing where I'm at the level I'm supposed to. Do you mind just kind of sitting with me and walking through it? And he's like, yeah, we'll look at it. And so he's looking, he's like, yeah, you've made some mistakes here, but they're, minor mistakes that, second language learners typically make. He's like, and then he kind of did this pause, and he's like, you belong here, right? And I was just like, I literally even thinking about it, makes me almost want to cry. Cause in that moment, no, I didn't actually believe that I belonged there. I felt very much inadequate and ill prepared to perform at that level in a second language. English would have been a different story. I would have felt very confident about it, but in Spanish, it's a complicated language. Communication is complicated. And, the fact that my professor told me that meant so much to me. I almost cried. He must have sensed it But I really needed to hear that in that moment because I was like doubting myself so hard and just thinking like, I'm not good enough for this program. I'm not smart enough. I don't speak Spanish well enough. I don't write the way that I'm supposed to. Just any bad thing that we tell ourselves about our own intelligence and sense of belonging in educational spaces, those are the things I was telling myself. And so that gave me just enough confidence to finish out the semester and to gain some confidence in myself, really is what happened. Yeah, so that's kind of my general experience in a nutshell. But it was, it's still hard. Like I work full time. It's hard to find time to have like balance in life, like having relationships and having friendships is challenging. And I don't even have kids. Like if I had kids, I don't even know how people do that. But grad school is like so hard and constant feeling like you're not doing enough, that you're not performing enough or at a high enough level. Like I still struggle with that all the time, like weekly. I think I'm just better about not listening to that, as not putting as much, not believing it as much as I used to. I still feel like I should be performing much better than I am, but I'm getting A's. So I hope they're not just sliding me through the system. God, I would hope not, because eventually I would like to teach a class on the side just to, some kind of Spanish literature class is actually something that I think about all the time because I do love what I'm studying. Yeah, so I think that leads me to think about, some things that I was never told. I never had somebody sit me down and be like, what is it that you're passionate about? Like nobody ever asked me like, what, are you excited about what you're learning? Do you want to continue learning about that? What is your passion? And I think something that I try to tell my students who are like, I want to go to grad school, but I don't know what I should study, or I don't know if this is what I should study. I want to say the conversation, maybe I just wasn't talking to the right people, but the conversation was never had with me. Like, are you passionate about this? Do you feel like this is, I don't want to say a calling, but you're putting so much time and money into it. I'm sorry, personally, my own philosophy is it better damn well be a calling for you. And I do feel like this is my calling, maybe more personal than professional, but it is something that is actually, I feel is embedded within my spirit, like at the very core of who I am, what I'm studying. And so I feel that strongly about it. So whether I am performing the way that I am supposed to be performing, I know I am passionate about it. And I know that if I'm not where I would like to be right now, I think eventually I will be. And I think that's super important to, ask yourselves as you're debating programs and areas of study, don't do it because it's like the practical thing. I'm not the type of person that making decisions based on that doesn't work for me. I have to feel a passion for something. And if I don't feel a passion, like if I didn't feel a passion for my job, I couldn't do what I do. I couldn't put the time and the effort and all of the energy into my job if I didn't absolutely love what I do. And the same thing for your education. You have to feel, I would advise that that somewhere within you that speaks to who you are at your core in some capacity. Nobody told me that. It was like, this program will help you in your job. Okay, that makes sense. And that ended up not being the right choice for me. And, I don't blame anybody for that. I think I've always been kind of like an out of the box type of person. Like I've never done things the way that I've supposed to do them, probably because I've had to figure out how to do many things in life on my own. So having a defined path was never an option for me. It was never available for me. And so I think that I know in some of our other workshops, we've had people that, studied one topic in their undergraduate and then go to vastly different topics because they weren't passionate about what their undergraduate was. And they wanted to do something else because that called more to who they were as a person. And I think, talk to lots of people. If I had talked to different types of people who were maybe who grew up like me, just figuring it out on their own and, didn't follow a traditional path, that might have, if I'd spoken to somebody like me, I think I'd have been like, oh my gosh, like I totally feel what you're saying. Because I see that in some of my not all, because some of my students tell me what to do, what's the right thing for me to do, and that works for them. But I see others who are like unconventional like me. And when I tell them my story, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. And I'm like, gosh, I wish I would have had somebody like me, but I didn't, because I just wasn't exposed to the things that I am, have finally been exposed to. So I think that's super important. I want to take a pause because I feel like I've been talking and I don't know if anybody has any specific questions about, anything that I said or needs any advice for any kind of situations that you've been in. I don't know if I'm missing anything in the chat. So I just kind of want to pause on my story because I feel like I've given it to you in a nutshell and see if there's any kind of specific questions that people might have.
There was a question I saw that popped up that says, was it overwhelming getting into grad school or was it more about finding what you want to do?
No, it was very overwhelming. And I think that's a good point. That's a great question. That's another thing that nobody told me. I talked to like 5 different people about grad school and how they got to where they were. And nobody told me, yeah, it was hard. Nobody told me, yeah, it was overwhelming. Nobody told me, yeah, I was depressed and I struggled. So yeah, it absolutely both times applying was very scary, very overwhelming, very time consuming. Because I think there's also an element of wanting to be accepted in this weird way. Like if you don't get accepted, you're not like worth something. And that's at least for me, how I felt like, oh, if I'm not accepted into this program, that must say something about my worth, right? Which is absolute BS, like not true. But there's that, also along with everything, the time and the effort, there's also that kind of thing like, oh, I want them to want me, right? And so, yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And you don't want to make the wrong decision. And like I said, the first time going into it, I didn't feel like I was making the wrong decision. I think my focus was on getting the job that I have now. And I think if I had felt less pressure and slowed down a little bit, I might have made a different decision. I don't know. It's hard to say that. But if I would have just been like, you know what, I do need to take this year off, let me think about it. I honestly think I would have made if I had waited a year, I would have made a very different decision than the initial one that I would have met. Because I would have been like, I've gotten this work experience. I have more focus on my career goals. And then how my own personal passion actually does tie into that. And I would have taken a different path, but whatever. It happened, it's done. But yeah, so it's a lot of pressure, writing the essays, getting the letters of recommendation, and then waiting, the whole waiting process. And with me, it didn't even happen the way it was supposed to because my application got messed up both times. So things didn't even happen for me within the acceptance process the way that they should have. So yeah. Let's see, I do see some questions here. Okay, saw the overwhelming one. Sorry, it's like hard to move it.
Where did most of them to you if you want, Tisha?
I see one. Where did you find most of your answers regarding grad school? I asked people. I was fortunate enough to work in an academic office that I had people who already had been through the process themselves and knew the answers. I talked to professors. I talked to the advisors. I talked to my own academic advisor who gave me advice, none of which I ended up taking because I think they had a different idea of what I was actually trying to do, but it was still helpful information because I knew what I didn't want to do. Talk to as many people either within education. We are all here for you, your professors, your advisors, any support service programs that you may be a part of. Talk to people. Don't be afraid. that's our job. That's what we're here for and what we love to do. If you happen to know anybody in the field that you're interested in studying or who has been in a program, talk to them. I can't stress enough, you cannot talk to enough people because you need to get different perspectives, because there's no right way to do this. There's all different kinds of ways, and you need to see that to know that if you have people telling you got to do this and then you got to do this, not necessarily, you got to do it in the way that works for you. Another thing nobody told me, you really have to do it in the way that works for you. And that can go against all the advice that people are giving you. But if it's what feels right for you, that's what you need to follow, not just with grad school, in any area of your life. But it has to feel right for you. Don't do it because other people are telling you this is what you should do and this is what's going to work for you, because it may not. I can, even what I'm saying, take what I'm saying now with a grain of salt. You know, hear my story, take what makes sense to you, throw away the rest, maybe throw it all away and talk to other people. I hope that's helpful for that question. And talk to the programs that you're also applying for. Don't sleep on that either. And talk to as many people as you can get access to within those programs too, and students within those programs. Would I recommend getting some experience before applying to grad school? I would. That's something I wish, like I said, I wish I would have done, because I think I would have made a very different choice, at least in my graduate program. Some people feel so certain about what they want to do and what they're pursuing that they don't do that. And I think that's fine too. But I think for a lot of people, especially if you're feeling uncertain about what it is that you want to do, or if there's any doubts about what you want to study, like you're just like, I don't actually know if this is what I want to study. Absolutely get some work experience, because that's going to tell you what you don't like about your work and what you do like about your work. Or if you need to do something entirely different, like we've had some speakers last week, share those experiences. I think for a lot of people that is good advice. But again, you have to do what feels right for yourself. And so if you feel like you're like, I don't want to, I just want to jump into it, and I think, I'm very certain about what I want to do, then that might work for you. I am planning to go for my PhD afterwards. Is that something to consider when applying to grad school, or are they two separate processes? They are two different processes. I haven't actually personally, I've looked into PhD programs. Gosh, that's a whole lot there. I believe the application process is different, because a lot of PhD programs you can get funded. So, yeah, those are two different processes. And, your master's doesn't necessarily have to coincide with your PhD, unless, of course, you're saying in medical school, then of course you want probably your graduate and your master's degree to be in some kind of science related field. So that's where it does make sense. That's one thing I can think of that you would want to keep an eye out, but go ahead, Sam.
Yes, I agree with everything Tisha just said. It also depends on if you need to do a master's before a PhD. There are some PhD programs that you can just jump into without doing a master's degree. And there's some that require a master's. So you really have to look at the type of degree you're wanting to get, and then understand the requirements for each of those types of programs and what school you're going to as well. But they are completely separate. For me, I have my master's, all of my degrees are different. My bachelor's in communication studies, political science, my master's in student affairs and higher education. And for my PhD, I was looking at like ethnic studies programs. So they do not have to be related. You just have to have the requirements, if that makes sense. Sometimes that's classes and sometimes it's the master's, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Or work experience too. One of the PhD programs I've looked at, it's a Latin American studies at the University of New Mexico, does require like work experience in certain areas as part of their requirements. But yeah. This is a good question. How different is the pace of classes in grad school compared to undergrad? I mean, it depends on the program. my program is a very small program. I actually take classes with undergraduate students, with students pursuing their bachelor's degrees, because it's such a small program and they're just trying to keep it alive, to be perfectly honest. But the expectations for the level of work I'm doing as a master's student is different from my undergraduate classmates. And so, you have to perform at a higher level. So what you're doing now, I just look back to the papers I used to write as an undergraduate and how much I used to stress. And I'm like, man, I wish I had to do that right now. Because I'm writing, 10, 15, 20 page papers, reading 6 books a semester, like books, like actual books. And this is actually one of my easier books. I had, like 6 books a semester. On top of supplemental reading, like literary review, literary critique, scholarly articles, class discussion. You have to be prepared. Like, you don't want to show up prepared. So basically, like, you don't get C's in grad school. I know that some people do. I've not even gotten a B I don't know how, but I've gotten all A's. Like, you should be performing at AB level. And so the pressure is on definitely to know your content, to, if you're writing papers, to be able to write a master's level paper. You're not going to be writing at an undergraduate level anymore. Depending on the program, like science programs, way harder, way, way, way harder than anything I'm doing. The pace is way, 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 way more intense than your undergraduate degree. So it kind of does depend on your program. That being said, there is a little bit more forgiveness in my own personal experience, because my professor knows that I work. He knows I work at a university. He's seen my calendar and he knows I'm back to back with students all day. I've never done this because it's a personal thing I feel weird about. But if I needed to ask for an extension, he'd be like, sure, no problem. Like, I have a final paper I have to write. And I was like, how many pages, how many sources? Like, I don't care how many sources, like 15, 20 pages. Does that sound okay? And I'm like, sure. So it's, and that's just him. Not all professors are that way. So there's a little bit more understanding that you are probably a working professional and a student. But you're definitely performing at a higher level. Okay, I want to go through these questions. Sorry. Once you graduate with your undergrad, does MSU offer help with the grad application process if you delay applying? This is where it helps to stay in touch with professors, any support service programs that you're part of, any academic advisors, because those people can help you if they have time. Some of the graduate programs may help you through that process. I don't want to speak for them because I know that there are some that may not be. I've just experienced with other students I worked with that aren't super great about helping students through the application process. So anybody that you have connections with that either works in education or has been through the process themselves is somebody you want to keep in contact with if you want to delay your application. Definitely. I think you can use career services for up to 1 year of after you graduate. So they may be able to help with some things. Let's see. My grad program was AC considering failing. Yep. C's are considered failing in some programs. I don't even know what a C is in mine. It might be failing too. How many classes are you taking per semester while working full-time? Great question. I take 1 per semester and I don't take summer. I'm a slow learner. I've always been a slow learner. I work really hard. I had a 3.7 GPA in my undergrad. I got all A's so far in my graduate program. I don't actually know what my GPA is right now. I should. But I'm a slow learner. And so taking more than 1 class is too much for me. My job is very taxing, very stressful. I'm also, 41, so I'm not like in my 20s or 30s anymore. So I just don't have as much energy. And so that's what works for me. Different people are going to make different choices. I took a summer class this past semester and regrets. I hated it. I was miserable. I was tired. It's been a rough year. Never going to do it again. I'm going to take my time because I take the alternate route. Let's see, questions. Do most master's programs emphasize research? Yeah, I mean, that looks different because some programs are more practical application stuff. So you're learning the theory, but more of how to apply it. a program like mine, I'm doing is like research and analyzing literature. It doesn't sound very interesting, probably sounds boring to some, but it's very theory heavy. And being able to write about different frameworks of analyzing literature and society and history. So it depends on your program, but those are questions when you're applying to programs. Is this a research institution, or, MSU Denver has the master's program. We're not a research-based institution, so it's more practical application, if that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, let me know, Sam.
I also want to add different master's programs have different requirements to show that you've become the master of what you're learning. So for example, I specifically chose a portfolio-based program. You can have some that require you to take a big examination, and then some of them that require you to do a thesis, which is usually like a really long paper. Tisha, I feel like you had a thesis one, but I can't remember exactly. And so if you do a thesis, that is a lot of research, sometimes your own, sometimes with the faculty, sometimes just like literature reviews. Tisha can probably talk more about that. I did a portfolio based one, and it was still like a giant book of writing, but it was a little bit different because I had to meet certain competencies in my program, which were just basically like learning things, I'm just going to say. So it depends on your program as well, what they require as far as research.
Yeah, and it's something, knowing what your options are at DU. There was a portfolio and a thesis option there. I was going to take the thesis option because I was like, I don't want to write a research paper about this. That sounds awful to me. In my current program that I am going to finish, I am actually taking the thesis option because my other option is taking a test, and I'm a horrible test taker. And it's your test over everything that you've learned throughout your entire master's degree. So you have to save all your notes and everything. And I'm like, that sounds awful. I would rather write a paper that I've actually, I'm able to start building that now in my current research that I'm doing. Like I focus on topics within the literature that I'm examining that matches what I want my thesis to be about. I'm still kind of hashing that out a little bit, but I'm going to have to write like a 50, 60 page paper, and then I think talk about it to a panel of professors, which is sounding really scary. And it's terrifying when I think about it, especially because I'm going to have to do it in Spanish, but that's the choice that I have made, and I will get myself there. Yeah. What other questions? Are there any other questions? I hope this is helpful. I think the biggest takeaway that I want y'all to kind of hear what I'm saying about my own story is like, you have to trust yourself to make the right decision for yourself. And if you don't know what that needs to look like for you, talk to as many people as you can. It doesn't mean that you have to take anybody's advice, but take what people are saying into consideration and integrate those things into what works and won't work for you. The biggest thing I could say is like, listen to yourself. You know what is good for you. You know what you need to do, and don't feel pressured to do anything other than that. I wish I had done that. I was a little more naive than I am now. And I think more uncertain of myself. I've gained a lot of confidence in myself, and, just as far as my vision for what I'm trying to make my life to be, it's clearer now, and I have more confidence in making decisions to make that happen. So trust that. And if you don't have that, you may need to take a pause and take some time off of school, which is totally okay, and figure that out for yourself. I felt like an imposter throughout this degree. I see good grades, but I question if I'm truly understanding it. So it's really given me reassurance that, hey, you belong here. So thank you. Yeah, I mean, we get negative messages about ourselves, I think in lots of different ways, but, even if you're not able to get good grades, that can be for other reasons. It doesn't mean that you're not intelligent enough and that you don't belong, because there can be lots of reasons why people struggle to get good grades. We put a lot of pressure on good grades because if you want to go to grad school, you have to have a good GPA, which is very true in some cases, but there's also ways that you can, get into grad school and get through grad school with a lower GPA. It's a number. And if you have a hard time putting out the information, but like in papers or in taking tests, but if you're able to practice the knowledge that you are learning, that's what really shows, I think for me, being able to put into practice the stuff that you are learning, like as an accountant, it may be hard to take a test or whatever. I don't know. I'm just making things up here. But if you're in your job as an accountant and able to do good work and have good results, then you may freak out during tests. But if you're doing good work on a daily basis, like you're doing good. Yeah. Yep. Imposter syndrome hits us all. Yeah. I think most of us are doing much better than we think we are, and that we even give ourselves credit for. And I know my internal critic is kind of mean. And I've been working really hard on, trying to be kinder to myself and recognizing how talented and skilled I actually am, which is a weird thing for me to say because I'm not trying to like talk myself up, which there's nothing wrong with that, even if I were. But I know I do good work and I know I'm very passionate about it. And the fact alone that I'm passionate about it counts for something. And I think the same goes in your education. If you're passionate about it, that counts for something that matters and that has huge worth, I think. Yeah, please don't forget to sign in, everybody. There's the Qualtrics link in the chat. If you haven't taken a screenshot of this for your trio participation, please do so now. I don't know, anything else from anybody? Questions, comments, anything I missed?
Tisha, you made me think of something that I kind of wanted to share. So it's kind of related to, well, I shouldn't say kind of, it is related to while you're in grad school. And I think you touched on this a little bit, but maybe I'll ask you to talk more about it from your experience. As you've gone through grad school, I know that there's a lot of stress and then that imposter syndrome that can come up, as well as other pressures and not wanting to disappoint people, all of that. Have you experienced any mental health challenges as you've been a student, and how have you found support, or like what have you done for that?
That's a great question. Yes, I have mental health issues. Currently, I'm doing great. I see a therapist, not just to manage my everyday stress, but some personal things that, we all got baggage, and I'm trying to work through that because that stuff does bleed into my work and into my schoolwork and my motivation. And so I see a therapist weekly to help adjust some of that stuff. I'm very where I know that I can be, I'm honest about where I'm at. Like Sam has been in meetings with me and I'm like, there's been times I've been like, yeah, I'm not doing great. I'm having a hard time. I not as good at it as I need to be, but I'm working on it, of just reaching out to people when I am having a hard time, even if it's just to spend time with somebody, maybe not to talk about my problems, but if it's just to be in company with somebody who I know cares about me just as a person, that feels good. I give myself breaks. There's been like last semester, I was struggling at the end of the semester. It's been a rough year. Personally, for me, it's been a rough year. And so at the end of last semester, I was struggling really hard. And thankfully, I had gotten ahead of my research on my final paper, but I did not get writing it as soon as I should have. And I kind of put it together very last minute because I didn't have it in me to write it. I sat in front of my computer and couldn't do it. And I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to let myself rest. And I know I will get it done. And I'm going to give myself grace. And I'm going to let my body and my brain and my heart recover from what it needs to recover from. And in 2 or 3 days, I'm just going to hit it, and I'm going to hit it hard. And me doing that for myself actually gave me the energy that I needed to write that paper and to write a really good paper. I got a 98 on that paper, on my final paper. And I was super proud of it because it's a topic that I'm super interested in. And I know what it took to get me there. So yeah, watch out for your mental health, get into therapy if you need it. If you don't believe in therapy or can't do that, reach out to people who know you and love you and care about you, and try to build relationships with people who know what you're going through in grad school. Because you'll have people who love you and care about you, but may not have been in grad school themselves, so they don't know how to help you. And that's okay. You can get from them the support that you need in other ways, but find people, if you can, in your graduate program, in your professional arena, that can, say, yeah, I know I'm having a hard time too. That sucks. What can we do to take care of each other? Can I help you? Can I edit your paper for you? What can I do for you to help carry the load? Is that helpful? Yeah, you got to watch your mental health. That's one of the biggest things that I remember well into my first quarter. I was like, nobody told me I was going to be this depressed. Nobody told me I was going to have this hard of a time because I'm so depressed and so exhausted from working all the time. Nobody told me that. And it would have been nice just to be to try to be as mentally prepared as you can about that. But they're like, oh, this is what happens. Oh, you want to apply to grad school? That's great. You're going to do great. You can do this. You get all these cheerleaders and positive affirmations, which is great. And, but they need, I think, I'm a practical person in other ways. We also need to tell people like, yes, this is great. And you're going to do great. And I'm so proud of you. And I've got your back. And it's going to be hard. And know that when it gets hard, I'm going to have your back. And here's what you do when it gets hard. Let me tell you about my experience when it was hard. So that way you can avoid those issues, or at least know that it could be coming for you. And know that when it comes for you, I got your back. Those weren't conversations that were being had with me that it would have been nice to have. Accidentally applied for summer 21 and got a scholarship. I do plan to attend. And then I also plan to attend fall 21 a lot. My friend, if you are not prepared for summer 21, what I'm going to say might be controversial. If it was an accident and if you feel like you want a break, take that break. Summer is hard. It passes fast. It's 8 weeks. It's condensed semester, lots of information. If you feel like you need a break, ain't no shame in that. Ain't no shame in that. Which organization sponsored this event? So we are First Generation Initiatives, TRIO Student Support Services, the Office of Graduate Studies, Career Services. Am I missing anybody?
Did you say career or
Career
access
Services.
center?
The Access Center? Oh, and
Yeah.
the Access Center. Yeah, the Access Center. Yeah, Maria, if you feel unprepared or you just don't want to take summer, you can see about deferring that scholarship. The worst they're going to tell you is no. And final word of advice, don't kill yourself for your degrees. It's not worth it. Your mental health and your peace of mind and your physical well-being is more important than a piece of paper. And you need to make it work for you the way that it needs to work for you. Don't kill yourself to get a degree. Might be controversial. I don't believe in that, but that's grain of salt,
Tisha, this was wonderful. And by the comments, I know that it was really helpful for a lot of the students here. So thank you very, very much for all of your words. We're at time, so I just want to be respectful of everyone's schedules. If you can with me, if you haven't already, write a note in the chat to thank Tisha, or you can use the reaction and do a little clap or a little party, whatever you would like to do. It's the little smiley face with the plus sign.
My email is in the chat. If you have questions or want to talk about grad school, have any questions, need help throughout the process, feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to help. And thank you for being here and taking the time. I hope it was helpful.
It was.
Thanks.
Everyone, thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, y'all. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. All right.